So this video is going to take you through how you can practice planning your response to an essay prompt under exam conditions. This might be something that you're feeling a fair bit of anxiety about, but hopefully by undertaking a process of practicing these steps multiple times using the 10-minute time constraint, you'll get yourself to a point where you feel fairly comfortable doing it. And so doing it under exam conditions will be much less nerve-wracking and will enable you to show what you can do and write the best essay possible. So the first thing you need to do when you open up the exam paper is to choose an essay topic. That might seem a little bit obvious, but it is important just to go over how you might go about doing that. Because if you're anything like me, you might be in a situation where you open up the exam paper, you see the choices of essay topics, and you freeze. So things to keep in mind, firstly, to set you at ease a little bit, do keep in mind that essay topics can't just ask you about anything. They'll only ever ask you about one of three things. So they'll only ever ask you about the themes of the novel, the characters in the novel, or sort of the way the text is put together. So it might be a question on structures or literary devices or something like that. Of course, there is also the option that it'll be about a combination of the three. But if you undertake a process of revision that focuses on really understanding the themes of the novels and the characters of the novel and some understanding as well of how the text is put together, then you will be more than prepared for any essay topic that will be presented to you on the day. There is a limit to what essay topics can ask you, even if they are blind, as we call it when you can't see it beforehand. So making sure you revise these things can really help allay that nervousness a little bit. So here are some tips for actually choosing an essay topic when you have that choice in front of you. First, choose a topic that you fully understand. So of the 4 topics, if there's one that makes perfect sense to you straight away, I would go with that one. You don't want to waste time really weighing up the pros and cons of each topic. 2, choose a topic that you feel comfortable writing about. So I would suggest that the exam is probably not the time to really challenge yourself and to pick a topic that is a little bit harder than ones that you've been working with, or probably is much harder than ones that you've been working with. Choose something that you feel can really show what you can do and show what your knowledge and understanding of the novel is and your analytical skill is. And related to that, I would choose a topic that allows you to draw on the sorts of themes and ideas that you've already written about in practice pieces or previous assessments, and preferably ones that you've had peer edited or perhaps checked by a teacher or have received feedback on. So you as these 3 sort of tips suggest, you want to pick something that you're comfortable about rather than using this as a chance to try something completely new. That's great to do when you're doing a drafted essay, but for an exam condition essay, you really want to be picking something you're a bit more comfortable with. So once you've chosen the essay topic, the first thing you should set about doing is identifying key words and phrases. I've said phrases because sometimes it might be a series of words. So I would always take a highlighter into the exam with you, and I would use that to mark the most important words and or phrases in an essay topic. So let's see what that might look like. Well, if our essay topic is "The Ghost Child shows that adversity is what leads to personal growth, discuss," you'd need to draw out what you think the most important words or phrases in that are. So something you might like to do, if you'd like to sort of practice now, you can pause the video and choose what you think the most important words or phrases in that topic are. If you'd like to continue watching, these are the words or phrases that I would probably draw out. So I need to draw out the word adversity. I think I need to unpack that a little bit more. I think the word leads, or the phrase leads to, is really important because it indicates that it's saying, well, the adversity is what causes the personal growth. And also this term personal growth. I'm going to have to unpack that a little bit as well. The other important thing to note is the directive term here. So when we get a topic like discuss, that also indicates to us the sort of response that we're going to craft. And I'll explain a little bit more what I mean by that when we actually break down these words. That leads us to our next step, which is brainstorming the synonyms and connections to the text that we can make from those keywords and phrases that we've just identified. So hopefully that process of highlighting keywords will take us less than a minute. This process will take us a little bit longer. So on the one hand, yes, we do need to brainstorm synonyms, but I think probably even more importantly than that and more helpfully than that is starting to unpack those terms in the context of the text. So making connections to the text. So for instance, let's look at the word adversity. Well, it is going to be useful for us to come up with some synonyms for that word. I'm not going to make an exhaustive list. I'm not going to make a super comprehensive list of 20 different synonyms for the word adversity, but just sort of the ones that come to me. And something that can be helpful for me to come up with those synonyms is using my dictionary. And hopefully I have brought a dictionary into the exam with me. So some synonyms I might come up with are challenges, low points, difficult or unpleasant situations. I've then undertaken that second step as well of jotting down connections between the key phrases and the text. So already when I'm thinking about low points or unpleasant situations encountered by the characters, I'm thinking if I'm focusing on Maddie, I'm thinking about, well, father's return to being the Iron Man, his abandonment of Maddie, the collapse of her relationship with Feather, the loss of the Fae. I'm just starting to brainstorm some really key moments of adversity of what that keyword makes me think of. Leads to, I probably don't need to make connections to the text here, probably just synonyms are okay. Stimulates, creates is the catalyst for. Growth I will need to break down a little bit. So again, I've undertaken that process of coming up with synonyms, development, maturity, gaining wisdom. But then also importantly, I'm making connections to the text. And I'm thinking, well, how does Matilda, if I'm focusing on Matilda, how does Matilda exhibit growth? Well, the road to the mountaintop, that's a really important one. One of the ways that Hartnett shows this process of growth is through this metaphor of the journey to the mountaintop. Maddie becoming Matilda, that's another really important marker of Maddie's maturity. Her growth in terms of her learning of the life lessons. So for instance, her epiphany on the island of stillness. And also when I'm thinking of personal growth, I'm thinking about kind of those two sections of the text. The first where Maddie's really egocentric, really self-centered, thinking about herself and her own difficulties. And the second being where she manages to step outside her own world and start to help others through, for instance, becoming an eye doctor and thinking about the broader world around her. When I have this word discuss, I don't need to interpret this. This is just a case of recalling what this directive term asks me to do. So when I get the word discuss, it indicates to me that I should look at more than one perspective. So I should, rather than taking an extreme, yes, it absolutely shows us that adversity is what leads to growth, or no, it never ever shows us that adversity is what leads to growth, I should have some sort of shades of grey in there. So a sophisticated response here would show nuance and complexity by saying, well, yes, on the one hand, adversity leads to growth but there's also this, where it doesn't lead to growth. Or alternatively, I might contend that no, adversity isn't what leads to growth. However, there are some examples where it's beneficial in some ways. So another way of thinking about that is taking the approach of saying, to some extent, this statement is true. And that's always what you should do when you get a discuss question, rather than taking an extreme position. The next stage is just rewriting the essay prompt as a question. Now, again, that should take us mere moments. This is particularly important for topics that are not already questions, like the sample topic we're working with here. It's really important for formulating a contention, because the way we get our contention is by answering the question that we pose ourselves. So we've got this question: the ghost child shows that adversity is what leads to personal growth. Discuss. It's as simple as turning it into, does the ghost child show that adversity is what leads to personal growth? And because we have that word discuss on there, we're reminding ourselves, to what extent? To what extent is this true? To what extent does the novel show us this? Then, of course, we need to answer the question we've just posed ourselves, and that will lead us to our contention. but just a boiled down version. And I'm going to show you how we then go about making that a bit more complex. So you might take the approach, and this is a sample, of course you could argue no, but for the purposes of this video, I'm saying yes, the ghost child does show that adversity is what leads to personal growth, but only to some extent. So I'm showing those shades of grey there. To turn this from just answering the question into a proper, complex, sophisticated, useful, interesting contention, first I need to turn this into a full sentence. Then I need to add a little bit more complexity, add a little bit more detail, not too much because it is a contention, but enough to make it interesting and meaty. And I'm going to be drawing on the synonyms that I created earlier in this brainstorming process to do that. So my contention might become, whilst the ghost child shows that the most unpleasant moments of our life, so I'm unpacking that term adversity, I'm not simply reusing the words of the essay prompt, that the most unpleasant moments of our life, and particularly those that involve loss, so there I'm starting to narrow the scope of my essay a little bit. I'm thinking, well, I'm going to be talking about loss here, are ultimately essential to the gaining of wisdom. Again, I'm replacing with synonyms. It also demonstrates that these moments can present obstacles on the journey to the mountaintop. So I've taken a yes, but approach. Yes, this is it. Yes, adversity is important to personal growth, but it can also hinder people's growth in some ways as well. Once I have this overall contention, this primary claim, I then need to set about thinking about my secondary claims. And I might go so far as to actually turn them into topic sentences, but if I've just written myself shorthand dot points before I start writing, that's fine as well. So I've got my contention, whilst the ghost child shows that the most unpleasant moments of our life, and particularly those that involve loss, are ultimately essential to the gaining of wisdom, it also demonstrates that these moments can present obstacles on the journey to the mountaintop. So because I'm arguing yes, but I'm going to present, my first secondary claim is going to present a yes, this is true. And I'm focusing on Feather because that was one of the characters or one of the moments of adversity that I brainstormed. The loss of Feather helps Maddie to recognize that love is not the most important thing and that each person must be free to undertake his or her own journey through a worthwhile life. Another obstacle or moment of adversity that I'm going to focus on is the loss of the Fae. Similarly, so I'm using transitional language, similarly, the loss of the Fae teaches Maddie that loss does not negate the experience of deep love. So again, adversity, but it led to personal growth. Now I'm going to show nuance by arguing against the essay prompt a little bit. So I'm going to say, however, and again, this is where transitional language is really, really important to show that I'm presenting an alternative perspective. However, it was the initial loss of her beloved papa and his reversion to the Iron Man that was the catalyst for Maddie's misunderstanding of the nature of relationships and determination to hold tightly to what she loves. So I've said, yes, adversity leads to growth in this way. It also leads to growth in this way, but it presents an obstacle in this way. Once I've developed my secondary claims, it's sort of up to you and your personal approach a little bit. You might want to spend a little bit longer planning and start brainstorming evidence, or if you're more like me, you might just like to get into writing. I like to just get going from that point with my quote sheet there in front of me and be integrating evidence as I go, but that's up to you and up to your personal preference. I've included here some practice topics that you can use at home to practice this 10-minute planning process. So try and use these topics one at a time. Set your phone up or a timer up, give yourself that 10 minutes of time and go through all of these steps. Perhaps the first couple of times you do it, you might want to have this video or the accompanying PowerPoint up in front of you to help you remember the steps, but then you should ease yourself off that and try and remember the steps as you go. There's also a list of topics from the drafted essays you wrote about, so you could pick one other than the one that you wrote about for your drafted essay and practice going through the process of planning an essay from that topic as well. And so that leads us to the conclusion of this video. Hopefully that helps you feel a little bit more confident about undertaking that 10 minutes of planning as you approach an essay prompt under exam conditions. Good luck.